The GEEK Files. This would be the 2025, December 21st. So we're in Nunavut, heading to Melville Island, up to the Pan-Arctic camp at Ray Point. The contract is to move some Terra tanks, big bladders, from the Pan-Arctic camp over to Bent Horn Island, where there's a pumping station, so that they can fill these tanks and then get ships in and get the oil out of the Arctic. So we're above 60. Pan-Arctic camp on Melville Island, 75 degrees north. So like compasses are useless up there. And this is the 80s, so it's before cell phones, it's before GPS, it's before everything that most people know. So you had two choices for navigation. Precision navigation, LORAN or Omega VLF. The Caribou also had a celestial dome in it, so that you could take sunshots. You could actually get out your sextant and take a sunshot. So we were going to use, that's why we had to go to Calgary to begin with, is they had to install the Omega VLF system. So we fuel up and off we go. Now, this was the days of two-part plastic paint just coming on the market, Centauri and something else. And when they repainted the Caribou, they didn't bother taking the static wicks off. And they just painted over the wings with the static wicks in place with plastic paint. Static electricity is a surface condition, and it built up on the top of the paint, and when it built up enough, it would jump over to the static wicks and then bleed off the aircraft. And you could hear this in your headphones. You'd hear this slow every once in a while. Never really thought anything of it. Didn't really affect us. Caribou was VFR, so would we care? So off we go. Out over the Beaufort in August. And we could hear the static build up. Now what was happening was, when there was no static buildup on the aircraft, the Omega VLF worked wonderfully. As soon as we got a certain amount of static, all of a sudden the Omega system went to DR, which means it could no longer pick up any of the radio stations. And we had no idea where we were. So we would be flying along, you'd hear this slow, steady, and headphones, the Omega VLF would go DR, so we would just hold the last heading until we heard a and then the Omega VLF would come back on, and you have to turn this way. So we'd then turn that way, turn left by whatever degrees, and we'd just follow that, hear this steady buildup. Static in our headphones until we heard the crack of the static on the wings jumping over to the static wicks, and then we'd turn right by 5 degrees, and away it would go. Can't remember how many hours it was to Melville. We had to go to Sax Harbor first to fuel. We could not make a dead run from Inuvik to Melville Island without fueling. And we had pre-positioned, because we were avgas, we were pre-positioned with fuel barrels in Sax Harbor. So off we go, and we're about 2 hours out. The captain says, no, we had made it to Sax Harbor. and we fueled. And then we took off again. So we were about 3 hours from mainland. The captain, Dean, decides that, okay, he's going to go for a sleep. So we used to pile all our gear up against the cargo bulk, forward cargo bulkhead, and it kept there. Less movement when you're near the center of gravity of the aircraft. Okay, so I get to sit in the captain's seat. Dean and I got the headphones on. Dean and I are chatting, and all of a sudden, the right-hand engine goes nuts. It goes from fine pitch right up to maximum RP, down to coarse pitch and minimum RP. And it's doing this. Of course, the airplane is yawing as it does this. I get out, Dean gets in. Now, because of the static problem, we really don't know where the hell we are. All we know is we're over the Beaufort, somewhere 2 or 3 hours away from the coast. So the next time things go, the Omega VLF comes back online, we immediately turn southeast. Now we know that Tuktoyaktuk and Inuvik are west of us, but we don't want to get caught and not know exactly where they are. So the strategy is you aim east until you hit the coast, and that way you know if you turn right, at some point you're going to run into Tuk. And that's what we do. And it's just 2 hours of sweating bullets because we have no idea where we are. The right engine is just going nuts. We're loaded with spares. 8,000 pounds of spares. And we're trundling along. No one's in a good mood. We hit the coast. We turn right. And about an hour later, we land in Tuk, which is, at that time of the year is closing down because everyone's coming off the rigs. And it's not Inuvik. So Inuvik, Ken Borak has a bigger town. Ken Borak had a crew house, so we could stay in the crew house. But Tuk isn't like that. And boy, did we. So we land, figure everything out, calm down, we made it. And I think we actually made the decision that we're going to fuel up and we're going to go to Inuvik. I think Inuvik's only another half hour by air or something. It's quite close because there's more stuff there. Tuk is an unimproved strip. There's nothing there. It's a bugger to get parts. And we can just sort of nurse the aircraft to there. So we do that. We nurse and get into Inuvik. The boys, Dean and Greg, bugger off. I pull the prop because I know there's something wrong with the governor. Now, it's not a normal governor. These things had reversing props. So the fuel governor hangs on the prop hub. It's got a tab that sticks out that engages into a fork in the engine reduction gear to stop the housing from turning. And then there's, on the front of the reduction gear, is this drive plate that engages with the drive for the oil pump for the gear. So no, there's something wrong in that. So pull the prop, pull the drive, and it all comes off. And it turns out that all the bolts on the drive ring, the fixed drive ring on the front of the engine housing, are sheared. Okay, that's weird. So I carried spare bolts No idea why I carried spare bolts, boy, but I had a bunch of spare of these drag bolts. Maybe they had given them problems in the past. So Dean comes out and asks me what's going on. I tell him what's going on. I said, oh, it's a quick fix. I've got the bolts, I got the torque wrench, I got all the parts. I can have this fixed. I don't know why this happened, but we'll just try it, run it up, see what happens. And so I start torquing these bolts, and they're hex heads because they're a countersunk bolt with a hex drive, and the heads are stripping out. I can't get torque on these things, which means they're softer than they need to be. And so I actually run out of bolts, and we actually have to order more of these bolts from Calgary. Well, this gets Steve Pennicut absolutely wound up. Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. He's over-torquing him, blah, 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 blah. Playing, armchair mechanic again, spooling Dean up. Dean comes out and says, "Oh, you're over-torquing, blah, blah." I said, "Okay, here it is." I had a couple of these extra bolts. I said, "Here it is. Here's the torque wrench. Here's the screws. This is what I'm doing. They're fine." So we get another set of bolts sent up, Air Express, because it wasn't that bad. There was Pacific Western had figured out that it's more profitable to carry cargo than passenger luggage. And at that time, they had an overnight guarantee. If it didn't reach you when you said it would, it was free. So they, oh God, Pacific, no wonder they went broke. So they were actually leaving passenger luggage on the runway to make sure that their cargo got, so they didn't have to pay out of pocket for missing deadlines. So they sent up these things, put them in, and they sat. Worked fine. And off we go and have a good kip. And this time we do make it up to Ray Point. It turned out later on, Aaron, the chief inspector, the quality guy, started digging into these bolts because this was weird. That they all sheared. You couldn't torque them. Well, it turned out good old Steve Pennicut got a deal on these bolts. These bolts were not cheap. I don't know what they were, but they were like heart-stoppingly expensive. And he got a deal on these bolts. And they say if it's too good to be true, then there's something wrong. Turned out they were counterfeit. They were someone was started making these bolts as counterfeit, and they were the wrong material, and they were just shearing out. There was no way that these bolts would ever work. So yeah, again, Pennicut and I butted heads over maintenance issues and quality issues on the aircraft. Yeah, but I'll tell you something, so that was the second time. So like in 2 days, I went from, oh shit, I'm going to die by running into trees at the end of a runway, to, oh shit, I'm going to die by landing in the Beaufort and freezing to death because no one knows where the hell we are, because we didn't know where the hell we were. Aviation, man.